haven't had any benefits or roped off swims or any pre-baiting of any type, no favours whatsoever. We've turned up and we've fished it exactly the same as you guys will if you come here. Now, there's a lot of things to bear in mind. Location on busy waters is absolutely paramount. And Simon, what would you say are the key things? I mean, why are we here, for example?
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest thing, as you mentioned, location, Adam. We got here, never been to this place before, and we've taken a good look round. We spent 2-3 hours yesterday afternoon walking around, selecting swims based on where the fish were showing. That was the key giveaway, wasn't it? We were seeing a lot of fish showing, and you know, unless you can't because the swims are taken, get on the fish, then you know that's got to be the best tactic. So see where the fish are and try and get as close to them as you possibly can, definitely, which is what we've done here in our choice of swims.
And I think on most places, if you walk round, the fish will be showing if you look closely enough and ask other anglers.
Yeah, definitely.
Most people are friendly, aren't they?
See what's been caught. You know, if someone's just leaving and they've had a few, then get in behind them, obviously, and try and suss out where they've been fishing. I mean, as we walk around, the guys here have been fantastic, very welcoming, and
very friendly,
we've had quite a lot of pointers and tips. So, you know, that would definitely be the best approach. Walk around. Don't arrive unless you've really had a good tip off. Don't arrive with the preconceived idea that I'm going to go in such and such a swim just because I fished it last month and it was good.
Exactly, or because it's comfortable or near the car park.
Yeah, so we picked this based on fish showing really out in this area and between the islands, and we've seen a few today. It's been quieter today, which is making me feel a little bit itchy underfoot.
There's a tactical thing worth mentioning as well, isn't there, that where the fish were showing, which is pretty much out here, we could have fished from there, couldn't we?
Yeah, definitely. We could have fished it from the other side, but we felt this gave us a better opportunity and less chance of people encroaching if we started to catch a few.
And that's a key point.
We were going to put a bit of bait out, and we didn't want to put bait out and then have someone casting on top of us.
Absolutely.
So you have to pick your swims carefully.
Absolutely. Be aware of where other anglers can go.
Yeah.
Because on lakes like this, you can get someone go opposite you or next to you and try and set up to your main advantage.
Yeah, definitely.
Point, isn't it? So what have you got out here? What's
okay, well, I've got the series of bars. There's some deep silty runs, and there's areas with a bit of silkweed on the bottom. So I'm fishing a sort of spread out towards the two transmitters in the distance, a range of about 60 yards. I had my float out, and then I fished one a little bit shorter, one a bit longer either side of that. So my left-hand rod will be fishing just to the right of the transmitter on the left-hand side of the swim.
Yeah.
My middle rod will be at the big transmitter, and then the right-hand rod is punched out over towards the corner of the lake, and I put that about 80 yards.
So you're spreading bait across that line, are you?
Yeah,
left to right?
Yeah, I guess 2 tennis courts end to end, sort of out there. Not baiting too tight. What I'm trying to do is bring fish in and get them picking in the swim rather than on a tight little spot. I see a lot of guys on places like this do a lot of spotting, and you know it's a different approach. Is to spread the bait and try and get fish thinking, oh, this is okay. We're quite safe here. It's not an intense fishing situation.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
coming
Absolutely. So are you fishing for gravel spots or weed or silt?
I'm certainly fishing. I'm trying to fish in the gullies between bars, and I'm trying to fish on the siltier areas. Right. Certainly picking up a bit of blanket weed. It's in my head. You think, oh my God, when you reel it in, blanket weed, disaster. But the fish are feeding in that blanket weed all the time. It's where the natural food is. The
and
fish.
You're picking it up when you wind in. It's not like that when it's
that's
sat
right.
there, is it?
Yeah. So, and if your bait is landing on that, the fish are finding their food in there all the time. So, as an angler, it's very important, and particularly anglers coming on this, maybe inexperienced, you don't have to find a crystal clean gravel spot necessarily.
No,
you know,
absolutely.
silty or a bit of weed on the bottom can be a good thing, and it can be very productive, definitely.
And there's things you can do to overcome that, aren't there? I saw you were using long hook links.
Yeah, extend the hook link.
Foam up.
Yeah, and I'm using a choddy on the right-hand side, so I'm fishing, if there is a bit of muck on the bottom, I'm fishing over the top of it.
Okay, nice. Well, briefly, my spot is to the right of you. It's in amongst a cluster of islands, so I've got 3 rods spread out there. I'm fishing fairly similar tactics to Simon, throwing stick and boilies, which we'll cover later on in the show. It's a more intimate, closer range spot. I've got a few options here as well. I've got a nice tree line down the inside, which I'm going to investigate later on, put a bit of bait in and see if I can get some interest. But all in all, we've got an area that commands a good part of the lake. We're fishing primarily where the fish have been showing, which is the #1 thing. But the other thing is, you know, we come down with mates, we like to fish together, so we've got somewhere comfortable where we can fish together and double up, and we've both got our own options. So, well, we've had a couple of bites, haven't we?
Yeah, one each, that'll do.
Yeah, it's early on. Let's see what comes of the rest of the trip. Now, Simon mentioned earlier about fishing intensively on a spot. And what he meant by that was very often when we come to busy lakes, people are spodding, they're putting rods fairly tight and they're drawing fish in and getting them to feed competitively. That works very, very well. But when fish come into that kind of feeding situation, they're under no illusion that there is danger of being caught. They'll compete, but they know there's a risk of being caught and their guard is up straight away. Can illustrate this by this spot that's down here. It's a small gravel spot surrounded by weeds, similar to a spot you might find out in the lake. Now, if I take a couple of handfuls of pellets and just drop those onto the spot, you can imagine a group of fish coming in, they're feeding on a very small, focused, intensive area. Now, to really sort of do the opposite of that and try and get the fish feeding, but without them realising that they're actually in a trapped feeding situation, Simon and I are scattering our bait. So what we're doing is using boilies, just nice big boilies, and putting them out with the throwing stick. And we're trying to create a big spread, as Simon said, a couple of tennis courts, nice and wide, deep. And what that does is it spreads the bait around, maybe a foot between each bait, a couple of feet here and there. And what it means is the fish come in, maybe just travelling along the lake bed, going about their random routine. They see a boilie, I'll drop down, have that boilie. It's a nice free, safe boilie. Comes up, enjoys the experience, swims along, and there's another one. At that point, you've got a fish in a captive feeding situation. You've got its attention, but it doesn't know it's being fished for because it's not on a small focused trap. It's just roaming about on the lake bed. Once you've got the fish feeding like that, they can be very, very easy to catch. One of the most important things on busy day ticket waters is to maximise the water you've got in front of you. Simon and I are doubled up in one small tight swim. The swim that's immediately next to us is effectively our swim, so I'm going to put a rod on it. It's only 5 yards from my bivvy. I'm going to put a float out. The wind is coming in here nicely. There's a cut through into a bay over my left shoulder. So I'm going to flick the float out. I had a little feel earlier, found a nice spot where the water drops off. We've got a nice deep silty margin. And one of the first things you'll notice when this float comes up is that I'm not fishing very far out. That's very, very deliberately, partly because I want to fish down the shelf. Nice and smooth silt there. And partly because no one ever fishes in close on these lakes. You watch people, they're all going out 60, 70 yards. Well, there you go. That's a lovely, lovely spot. It's just over 9 feet deep. It's a smooth, silty area. As I say, I put a float there earlier. I know it goes up behind onto 5 foot and gravel, and to the left it shallows up, and it just drops down into a deep gully that runs along this margin. It's smooth, it's silty, it's close in, probably a spot that gets overlooked, so let's get some bait on it.
Okay, so we're 7 hours in and I'm getting itchy feet. We set up our plot yesterday evening, we put a bit of bait out, and this morning we've had a fish each, but we've been sat here this afternoon and very little's happened, so I've decided to have a little bit of a stroll about. So what I've done is I've crept around the corner here, I've put a little bit of bait in, and the water looks a bit coloured up now, so I've reeled in the main rods off the spot I'm fishing. I'm going to just take the stalking gear with me and just see if I can nick one out the edge. Anything to try and get myself one step ahead of Adam. So let's see what we can do. Okay, so this is the next swim round from the spot that Adam and I are fishing. And between the two swims is a big series of fallen trees. And it looks very, very fishy. And you can see, if you go in the back of the snags, you can see it's all polished where the fish have been coming in. So I'm really confident there's been fish in there. I've been putting a little tiny bit of bait just in the corner of this swim. So this is one of the fishing swims, right in the edge. And when I last come round about 15, 20 minutes ago, there's a bit of colour in the water. So I'm thinking perhaps the odd one's been coming in here, and as I say, things aren't happening in the main swim, so reel in it and see if we can create a chance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my rig in just down by the edge of these snags. Now, I plumb for a really basic setup. just a trimmed down fish meal boilie with a little bit of pop-up on the top just to balance it. Really simple stuff, size 6 hook, a little bit of putty on the old soft-coated braid, nice and strong gear, little running lead, keeping it really simple, very, very simple setup, but I'm going to literally be sitting right on the rod because I'm going to be fishing right up against the tree, so it's very important to be close to the gear. So what I'll do is we'll get this in and see what we can do.
Well, as you can see, I've leapfrogged Simon one swim down to where I set up this extra rod. I've now got another rod lying on the floor next to it. There's a few fish moving out here, and I'm just trying to decide whether I should move in here, set my bivvy up and do the night in here. So I'm going to play it by ear. It's late afternoon now, end of day one. Simon, I think, would agree with me. We're a little bit disappointed. We've had one fish each. We're pleased that we've caught, but I think we could have and should have caught more. The tactics that we've employed may not have been the right ones. So we're ringing the changes. Simon's having to go stalking, which is very proficient at. I'm sure he'll get a result on that maybe tomorrow. There's been fish coming in on his spot. There's fish rolling out here, and we've still got the main zones as well where we've caught from. So it's the first night. We're going to get everything sorted now, get the rods out properly, get some food, and wait and see what happens. So fingers crossed.
Well, I've given it a go. I've done a couple of hours in there, and although there was definitely 2 periods I had fish in the swim because the old line was twitching and the rod tip knocked a couple of times, a couple of bubbles coming up, no bites were forthcoming, so I think conditions are fantastic in the main swim, so it's time to get those rods back out and see if we can't get a bite off the baited area.